welcome to the Port Huron Statement. So today we're going to talk about something, and I have a lot of topical stuff I want to cover, and I'm working on those scripts, but this I've been holding for a minute, and it's really important because this is like the basis of how people get taken in, and it's really germane right now because the political atmosphere and the gravity of the moment. And also, these techniques are utilized in media, in interpersonal relationships, by all types of organizations. And it has become a sort of toolkit for scams and exploitation. It's been used by intelligence operators and organizations like the CIA exhaustively in information gathering, but also in behavior modification and information containment, things like that, where the goal is to isolate a population from reality, create an engineered reality in order to exploit that population. And that population could be the entirety of the country, or it can be a microcosm, again, organization, churches, cults. A lot of these corporations use it, politicians, political movements, and mostly in a psychologically operative infrastructure, like with a long-term exploitive goal that cascades down. So you may be engaging with someone utilizing these tactics, and their goal might be completely unrelated to geopolitical goals, or it could be related to a massive orchestration of, media and press, specifically, social media, specifically, all types of media, but also a lot of isolation tactics, the utilization of high control groups to create information and personal isolation in order to perpetuate misinformation, disinformation, to enable these exploitive stratagems, schemes, whether they be cascading down from the president, or whether they be just a local machination designed to, enrich, advantage, or prey upon someone or something, some group. That feeling after a conversation where you agreed to something you really didn't want to. Maybe you were left thinking, how did they talk me into that? Or maybe you were convinced something was right, that you entered the conversation convinced wasn't right. It's not that you were lazy, weak, or uninformed. It's more likely that you were spoken to utilizing a language that you didn't even know that you were interpreting, a language of hidden commands, emotional hooks, and psychological shortcuts designed specifically to create a dominance position for, the practitioner of the NLP. And that's what we're going to pull the curtain back on, is the probably one of the most common but least popularly understood weapons in the psychologically operative and manipulators' arsenal, which is Neuro-Linguistic Programming, commonly known as NLP. And what that is it's a technique of using language to more or less bypass your consciousness, your logic, your reason, even really your identity, and enforce compliance. Most importantly, It's about spotting individuals that are critical to an organization or a group that are vulnerable to these types of techniques and utilizing them to create obedience across, often a large swath of the population. Neuro-linguistic programming might sound like a mouthful, but it actually does describe pretty accurately what it is. It's a set of techniques that claim to model the connection between how we think, how we communicate, and the behavioral patterns that we exhibit. So how we think, neuro, how we communicate, linguistic, and patterns of behavior programming. It was designed in the 1970s by a duo named Richard Bandler and John Grinder. John Grinder was a linguistics professor, and Bandler was just a college dropout. They studied mastered communicators, con men, hype men, people like Creel from the, the propaganda for World War I, stuff like that. The hypnotherapist Milton Erickson, the Gestalt therapist Fritz Perls, and they utilized their methods and broke them down into a playbook. It was originally pitched as a study in excellence, but it quickly developed into a sort of dark arts. It promised not necessarily excellence, but the ability to control how people think and feel, even in short-term interactions. It's been called the most influential therapy you've never heard of, and it's been used by everyone from Fortune 500 boardrooms to the U.S. military, sex cults, and child sexually exploitive individuals, CSAM producers, covert interrogators, and the intelligence community like CIA and Mossad. The question is not if you've encountered it, it's when and what has it resulted in. NLP has a whole bag of tricks, but we're only going to focus on the ones. Right now I'm going to go through a sequence of more common ones of these, and then I'm going to do a second one that's both based on general linguistic exploitation tactics, but we're going to go through these. Tool number one in NLP is called mirroring and matching, and the development of a false friendship. Have you ever had someone become really fast friends with you that you click immediately with? They stand the way you stand, they use the same words that you use, and they maybe breathe in the same rhythm. They're dressing in the same way you dress, they're using the same lexicon. That's mirroring, and it's an NLP foundational technique. And maybe it's not like you, but how you want to be, because there's also an aspirational mirroring thing. But anyway, by subtly copying your body language, speech patterns, and gestures, a manipulator can hack your brain's social wiring. The unconscious thinks this person is like me, so therefore they're trustworthy, they will relate to me, and it'll inspire you to engage with them, And the more research that's done in order to encourage this. So if you're a target or a subject, the more they know about your person, the more effectively they can do this. I mean, you could just wear a t-shirt of something that, the subject or the target's a major fan of in a social event, for example, if you're trying to create contact. And before you know it, you've lowered your defenses and, they're starting to steer you emotionally and linguistically. Another example is anchoring. This is also known as the emotional button. You may have heard of Pavlov's dog and Pavlov's bell. It's similar principle. Anchoring is when you attach a specific emotion, like comfort, excitement, or fear, to a trigger, usually a sensory trigger. It could be a touch on the arm, a certain word, a gesture. Maybe a salesperson puts a warm hand on your shoulder while talking about how safe the vehicle that you're considering purchasing is. And this is meant to inspire a sense of comfort. And later, when you're hesitating about the price, they utilize a similar pattern intentionally meant to parallel comforting, sensations from like paternal relationship. And that old feeling comes back. You've been anchored, and they've utilized this emotional connection in order to make you feel more comfortable with whatever they're trying to persuade you to do in that instance. And more than anything else, though, fear is used as a major anchoring device, and things like hate, scapegoating, like blame the immigrants, or blame China, or, blame Pam Bondi, or blame Epstein, or blame, jeez. Oh my gosh. Jerome Powell, blame Jerome Powell. Tool number 3, embedded commands. A hidden directive. This is where language gets really weaponized. An embedded command is a direct instruction hidden inside an innocent sentence. For example, you might not want to feel relaxed right now because it's so important to be open to new ideas. Your conscious mind hears the not and the because, but your unconscious mind, the part that drives your decisions in a lot of situations, if you're not conscious of it, hears the words relaxed, open to new ideas, and it carries out the order without your conscious permission. Cult recruiters, high-pressure salespeople, intelligence operators, and even therapists will use this technique to intentionally bypass critical thinking. All right, now tool number 4, the Milton model, or the hypnotic frog. Named after the hypnotherapist Milton Erickson, this is a set of language patterns designed to allow, or is a series of language patterns which are designed to be artfully vague. They use phrases so ambiguous and so lacking in specific meaning, designed to allow you to project your own interpretations and opinions onto it, to fill in the blanks. It almost always fills them in with something that they want to learn from you, to mine for information, or they're intentionally creating language that will get you to complete the sentence. So it's either an information mining technique or a means of orchestrating a conversation such that you are going to offer the conclusions that they're trying to get to persuade you to. They'll say things like, and you can begin to feel a sense of understanding, can't you? You're not sure what you understand, but the word itself triggers the feeling. You're being hypnotized gently and without any swinging pocket watch. So what is this all about, and who uses this stuff? Cults and high control groups, a lot of evangelical groups. The infamous sex cult NXIVM used NLP as a core part of its recruitment and indoctrination process. The same is true of characters like Jim Jones and David Koresh. A lot of this is intelligence community related. Billy Graham is deeply, deeply embedded in the neuro-linguistic programming thing, including his time with DARPA cooking up how to persuade people to submit their control, judgment, and ethics to an evangelical interpretation steered by Billy Graham. I mean, there was intelligence operators and psychological scientists at the cutting edge that were feeding him techniques, Billy Graham, with the explicit desire to utilize him as a mechanism to steer greater American opinion, with a lot of, frankly, nefarious goals in mind. And those nefarious goals impact from the national level all the way down to, what you'd call Main Street and the personal level. The co-founder of NXIVM, Nancy Salzman, was an NLP practitioner long before NXIVM was even founded, or she became a part of it. The techniques help isolate a person's identity, break down their beliefs, and install new compliant ones under the guise of things like personal growth. NLP itself isn't necessarily a cult. As one trainer put it, its techniques are powerful tools in the hands of those with good intentions, or especially with bad intentions. And this cultish language is used by everyone from Joel Osteen and Jim Jones to people like Donald Trump and Stephen Miller. High-pressure sales and corporate training utilizes NLP. It's become a multi-billion-dollar industry in the form of assorted motivational speakers. This is the type of tactic that's used in pickup artistry. In sales, it's rebranded as persuasion science. In corporate boardrooms, they call it leadership development. But in the core remains the same: to bypass your logic and trigger an automatic response or a desired response. And in intelligence and interrogation, that's where it comes from, and that's where it's more prevalent. And also, you have to remember, in what's called behavior modification. I mean, this is literally designed for behavior modification. It's explicitly stated in the prologue of these NLP books. There are persistent reports that NLP techniques have been deployed in the intelligence community and military agencies like Mossad, CIA, the entire U.S. intelligence infrastructure, especially if you're dealing with people, if you're an operator or handler, you're going to be using NLP on every day. And sociopaths, manipulators, con men, fraudsters, politically exploitive individuals, the CSAM crowd and the blackmail economy people, the Epstein people, they all utilize this. This is the core forms of engagement by which they're able to, create, manufacture consent. That's the term. To manufacture consent and then to orchestrate obedience. And then it's a sliding, an avalanche of obedience. Because at first you utilize these techniques, and then for the power players, you utilize teens and young people, sexualize them with the power player, and then you have further compelled obedience in the form of recorded pedophilia. And that also becomes a gatekeeping mechanism, because if you're a billionaire, someone that's trying to control the population, you're trying to keep your skeletons in the closet, you're going to want to make sure everyone that's in a position of authority has an absolute absolute obedience to you. And this is how they make sure of it. It functions as it functions to gain money, it functions to earn favors, and compel obedience in an absolute way. The reason the Epstein case is so sprawling is because the technique of using blackmail to compel compliance in political actors is so common. It is out of control. The reason that we're even engaging, there is so much being motivated right now by the fact that Donald Trump is puppeted by compromise possessed on him, by Benjamin Netanyahu, and by Putin. This is pretty clear if you go through the Epstein files and just look at geopolitics and just have eyes, so that gives you an idea of how sort of deeply these techniques have been utilized in order to compromise decision making from the top to the bottom. And it's contributed to, really the worst things in American history. So how to protect yourself from this? The biggest things is knowing about these techniques. That's the biggest thing, is knowing about them. NLP is not a fringe conspiracy theory. It's a documented multi-billion-dollar field industry. You could even consider it something like an academic or scholarly thing. I mean, I don't think it's wrong to look into the psychology of this, but the way it's being utilized, and the reason it works is largely the ignorance of it. So the more you're aware of it, the more it ceases to work, because, media uses this a lot. Therapy, marketing, military science, but its primary function is to induce a state of control, dominance, and subordination. And the deeper truth is that these techniques work on anyone who doesn't listen for them or isn't conscious of if you're not really conscious of the conversation, you're not conscious of these techniques, they can work on you. They work because they mimic the natural circuits for brains that your brain uses to navigate the social world. So the idea is that the response becomes sort of like automatic, logically necessitated, reflexive. The idea is to make the desired behavior or response seem like reflex. And the response to all of this isn't to become paranoid and isolate yourself, but it is important to become aware. To be conscious of your language and the language of those around you. To slow down the conversation, if even in your own mind, and insist on genuine, transparent communication, especially in media. Calling it out, identifying the motivations. Even if you don't call it out, be conscious of it, because people are constantly subjecting you to these tactics, and whenever they're deploying them, they are most likely trying to exploit you and manipulate you. I'm actually going to do another one on this that goes deeper into it, I think. I almost just wanted to go right into it. There are a couple more of these. And, it's wild. The human brain processes 11 billion bits of information per second through your cerebellum and your general cerebral cortex, the midbrain, all these things combined. But your conscious mind, generally the human mind's only... So there's a gap. If you're not being conscious of your conversations and you're not mindful, then that's where these manipulations sort of live. The persuaders, the manipulators, the con men, the fraudsters, the high control groups, the people who figured out that if you can't consciously process what's happening, you can't defend against it. Or, on a sort of parallel thing, if and when they convince you of a higher power, then they will deploy that higher power, engineer it to their agenda, and then deploy that to control you because you can't argue with God. And a lot of these do intend to move someone into an ideological worldview and milieu, a group, a clique that dictates, worldview, religious and spiritual stuff is all dictated. I mean, this is usually a step into getting to someone into a higher control scenario, generally, whether it's to buy an insurance plan on a used car or it's to join a cult. There's... And again, being persuasive isn't necessarily wrong. It's just that these tactics are intentionally kept out of the public eye and disproportionately utilized by people with nefarious intentions. So let's look at a couple more tricks. Presupposition. The basic move is a presupposition is a statement that contains an assumption the listener accepts without noticing. For example, when will the government stop wasting our tax dollars? Wait a minute. You didn't decide if the government was wasting money. That point was already assumed. It was inserted. You got asked when it will stop. The waste is presupposed. And if you're not conscious of it, a lot of the times your brain will accept it as a given. And this is a way that they will convince you of things. Like the primary thing that they're trying to convince you of is going to be the thing that they're going to, in the sentences, take as a given. So that if you are like, wait a minute, the government's not wasting our money, then you're an idiot type thing. Oh, but, and they'll be probably preloaded with a bunch of condescending facts that you could never be ready to, counter because you haven't prepared for the engagement, because you don't have an agenda that you're trying to manipulate them with. They have an agenda they're trying to manipulate you with. And so that's a whole other thing too, is utilizing this sense of dominance by being pre-prepared with a shit ton of information, utilizing something embedded in the sentence like that. And if you do happen upon it, then utilizing your mentioning of it as a means to create dominance through, a barrage of information, making you seem, more informed and shit. Example 2, have you considered joining our community to deepen your spiritual journey? The presupposition is that spiritual deepening is desirable, and that hand is the path to achieve that. So you should join. The listener thinks they're answering a question, but they're being led into accepting an entire framework on probably lifestyle and a bunch of other things, tithing. Here's another one. Do you think it's time to upgrade your phone? This is a sales example, and it presupposes that your phone is updated. It makes a judgment, and if you don't want to take a position of inferiority, then you're going to be like, oh, yes, I need to update my phone. Oftentimes, your brain can be somewhat lazy. It processes language for meaning, not necessarily for the logical cascade and structure. Oftentimes, your conscious mind will accept presuppositions as true, even if you didn't realize you've been guided. And if you don't assume them as true, oftentimes an individual will be preloaded, like I said, with information prepared to combat any pushback on their presupposed fact. And that can be another mechanism of creating a dominant relationship. Here's another one, which is anchoring. The manipulator will establish an initial anchor or reference point, and everything follows is compared to that. The car salesman might say, this model runs $45,000. But for today, we can do it for $38,000, only today. So then that $38,000 feels like a bargain. But if you don't do an independent verification, you don't know what it's actually worth. It's just an assumed bargain because you make the assumption that the appraisal and the information being provided is correct. Here's another example. We used to have a 90% approval rate, we used to have a 90% approval rating among our members. Now we're at 65%. Your brain anchors to 90%, 65%. Whether the 90% was ever real at all. So again, it's always about enforcing an assumption in the language of the dialogue. Here's another one. Scientists warn of catastrophic climate change in the next 20 years. It's just you anchor to that date of 2050, and then subsequently, if press states that new research suggests that we have until 2070 before a catastrophic climate event, it gives you a sense of relief. You don't notice that the fundamental situation hasn't changed, just the timeline, and if even the timeline, just the interpretation of the timeline. The first number you hear becomes your reference frame. Everything else is judged relevant relative to it. And this is both because you're assuming good faith in the person you're conversating with, and also you're responding to this sort of last query and last relevant element of the conversation, not necessarily engaging with every piece of the conversation. But by doing that, you can extend a dialogue so deeply into the assumption of a fact like this that someone will just continue to assume it as correct. Another example is the illusion of choice. Offer options that all lead to the same or a desirable outcome. The target gets the impression that they're choosing, but they're actually being funneled or corralled into a decision that advantages the manipulator. Would you prefer to be baptized on Sunday morning or Sunday evening? You can take this medication daily, or we have a weekly injection option. We're downsizing. You can take a severance package, or you can relocate to our new office. Both options result in losing your current position. The choice disguises the news, the constraint. Not some way to like break news. That's just another one. Another example is like, do you support the Democrats or Republicans? Well, I don't support either major party. But there's a constant false binary that's going on. There's a constant right versus left, which simplifies everything, makes it out like, you can't be, I don't know, be for gay rights and be a Republican or something, or you can't be for, just for... Oh man, you can't, I'm getting in the weeds on this one. The point is it's a false binary, which is a whole nother thing. It's parallel to this. It's the illusion of choice, where it's this or this, and other options are ignored intentionally so that you don't consider them. They're out of mind, out of sight, out of mind type thing. Pacing and leading. Start with statements the target agrees with, then gradually shift the subject matter. Because they've been agreeing, they often keep agreeing even if the topic changes. Don't you agree that modern society is isolating? And that people need community? And that our community is based on truth? And that members need to cut ties with people who reject truth? And let me reveal to you the truth. It's in this book, in this pamphlet. So, here's another one. The economy is important to you, right? And your job is important to you, right? And you care about your family's security and your housing security. So then you understand why this policy is necessary, or why we need to keep immigrants out, or why we need to be in the war with Iran, maybe. I mean, it could be anything. It creates this sense of momentum and even a sense of camaraderie. Once you start agreeing, it's easier to keep agreeing. And often this momentum is used to shift the conversation gradually towards a desired conclusion. And this desired conclusion then will be perpetually reinforced until it becomes your authentic opinion. Here's another example. Loaded language. Use adjectives and framing that carry emotional weight and make disagreement seem completely unreasonable. Instead of parents who oppose this curriculum A, we say concerned parents are fighting back against the cruel indoctrination of curriculum A. Or conservative parents are fighting against the exploitation of curriculum A. The adjectives make the position seem necessary to make any opposition seem depraved. And positioning the curriculum as an indoctrination and fighting back as a call to action and a sign of bravery. There are a lot of nuances to the language as well. A good example is the pro-life versus anti-abortion. These become cultural cues too. They're about the clique and the clique enforcing opinions, and this is where you get into the organizational and social element, where these tactics are being used to enforce opinions on organizations that you have engaged with and are a part of. People will utilize these tactics to politically manipulate you in organizational structures as a constant barrage. I mean, not everyone, but a lot of them is where it's gotten to. But everything's been politicized. So, pro-life versus abortion. Pro-life sounds positive. Who's against life? Anti-abortion sounds like you're against something which is less emotionally loaded. The same opinion, different linguistic programming or framing. One sounds noble, the other is more reactive. And that's why they go with pro-life too. I mean, who can be against life? Another example here is another one. Like, our community is devoted to spiritual growth. Our community is designed to manipulate members into financial and sexual compliance while using scripture to justify it. The first uses aspirational language. The second describes the actual reality. Which one is going to recruit people?
Which one is going to recruit people?
Here's another one. Authority and credentialism. Claim or imply expertise or authority that you may or may not possess, and incite authorities regardless of their relevance to the claim. 4 or 5 dentists prefer our toothpaste. Scientists say our product is safe.
Dentists.
Einstein said imagination is more
prefer our
important than
toothpaste.
knowledge.
Scientists say our product is safe.
Applying that to
Einstein said imagination is
you can
more
misquote an
important
authority,
than
or you can
knowledge.
actually accurately quote them, but then
Applying
assign
that
it
to
in a way that's
whatever. You can misquote an authority, or you can actually accurately quote them, but then assign it
people associate
in a way
Einstein
that's
with whatever it is that you're
assumptive
producing.
and leading,
Or then use
to make
vague
people associate
credentials like
Einstein
as a
with
wellness
whatever it
expert.
is that you're producing.
I can tell you that this supplement
Or then
is
use vague
gonna extend your
credentials
life
like as a
1,000 years.
wellness expert.
Or
I can tell you that this
just
supplement
randomly
is
picking an
going
institution,
to extend your life
the
1,000
AMA or
years.
the APA,
Or
or NASA
just
says
randomly picking an
we're taught to
institution,
respect
the AMA
authority,
or
expertise,
the
and
APA,
credentials.
or NASA says
People put a PhD.
we're
at the
taught
end
to
of the name,
respect
and you're
authority,
assumed to
expertise,
just
and
have that.
credentials.
You're expected to just assume everything he says.
People
is
put a
correct.
PhD at the end of
We
the
don't have
name,
time
and
to
you're
verify
assumed to
every claim,
just
so
have
we
you're
use
expected to
authority
just
as a
assume everything they say
shortcut.
is
We use
correct.
credentials.
We don't have
as
time to verify
a
every
short,
claim, so we use
hand
authority as
for,
a shortcut. We
authority
use
on
credentials
a topic
as a
without
short
verifying
hand
validity
for
and without
authority on a topic,
deeply
without
criticizing
verifying the validity and without deeply
authority
criticizing.
and credentialing allows manipulators to exploit this by misrepresenting
and
or
credentialing
overstating
allows
actual
manipulators to
authorities
exploit
or
this
just facts.
by
Because
misrepresenting
ultimately
or
the
overstating
credentialing becomes
what
a
actual
means to
authorities
defy
or
facts
just
for
facts
the purpose of
suggest.
exploitation.
Because
I mean,
ultimately,
it can either be
credentialing
a
then
means
becomes a
to
means
gain
to defy
credibility,
facts
to
for the
reinforce
purpose of
and to
exploitation.
spread
I mean,
to
it can either be a
information,
means to gain
or
credibility,
becomes a means
to
gain
reinforce
confidence,
and to spread
to advance
truth,
lies,
information,
to
or it
advantage
becomes a
yourself
means to gain
individually,
confidence,
or a
to
group
advance
that you're part of
lies,
that will
to
in turn
advantage
benefit.
yourself individually.
There are a lot of
Or,
paid
a group
opinions.
that
You'll be
that
really
you're part of
surprised
that will
over
then
time. I
in
think it's
turn
going to start
benefit
coming
you.
out more and more just how many
There are a lot
people
of
are being
paid opinions.
paid now
You'll
for
be really
opinions.
surprised
To
over time. I think it's
push
going to start
onto
coming out
you
more and more just how many people are
opinions,
being paid right
even
now
outside of influencers on YouTube.
to push
People
onto you
in your churches and your
opinions,
schools,
even
in your
outside of
workplace
influencers
that
on
are being
YouTube,
paid to
people
promote opinions,
in your churches and your schools,
interpretations
in
of policy,
workplace that are being
political,
paid to promote opinions,
and
and
obviously
other things,
to gather you spiff and
interpretations of policy, political
affiliate
leadership,
marketing for
and obviously
church
to
groups and stuff like
gather
that,
the
and
spiff and
systems
using affiliate marketing
ultimately
for
by intelligence
like church
and
groups and stuff like that, and this is being
TPUSA is
organized
swimming in Mossad, and
ultimately by
ultimately
intelligence
grants
communities,
them
like
CIA.
just like TPUSA is swimming in
They
Mossad,
deploy these
and
intelligence
ultimately
community
Grant is
tactics
swimming in
to
CIA.
recruit.
So they deploy
Absolutely,
these
that's where it's
intelligence
coming from.
community
The other one is
tactics
the social
to
proof of the
recruit.
bandwagon. Claim that most people
Absolutely,
agree
that's
with
where this is
you
all
or
coming
anyone who
from.
holds your same
The other one is
values.
the social
like all
proof of the
Christians,
bandwagon.
like
Claim that
you know,
most
like the
people
TPUSA
agree with
stuff.
you or anyone who holds your same values or like all Christians,
sort of
XYZ.
desire to
like the
click with your
TPUSA
culture, identity stuff.
This
and
triggers a
most of our
conformity
members
sort of
find
desire
ties with family
to
greatly
click with
improves
your
their spiritual
culture,
progress.
identity stuff.
For example, or if anyone is
Most of our members
critical of your
find that
spiritual
cutting ties
journey,
with
you
family
should cut
greatly
ties
improves their
with them.
spiritual progress. For example, or if
this
anyone
is a
is
great way to
critical
figure
of your
out
spiritual journey, you
millions of
should cut
Americans
ties
are
with
turning to
them.
cryptocurrency. This creates the
This is a
assumption
great
that
way
you
to
should
create
buy
a
the investment
solution.
cryptocurrency.
Millions of
FOMO
Americans
type
are
thing,
turning to
fear of missing out.
cryptocurrency.
Our church
This
is the
creates the
fastest
assumption that
growing
you should
in the
be investing in
region.
cryptocurrency, a
The
FOMO type
assumption
thing, fear of missing
if
out.
you're growing so
Our church
fast,
is
there
the
must be
fastest
something
growing
special
in the
about your church.
region, and there's the assumption that
if you're growing so fast, there must be something special about your church. I need to go there.
Desire to be accepted.
Humans
often
will have like a click instinct and a desire to be accepted.
Develop normalcy,
often taking cues from
acceptability.
And so that will be aspirational, develop normalcy, or create acceptability. And so if someone's utilizing this language to create a desire for you to join,
exploitive. It's
like, and again, this doesn't mean that every single example is exploitive. It's just extremely common in exploitive individuals and organizations. The bandwagon where everyone's doing it,
and it's almost always
is actually
fabricating consensus, because to say you should do
pretty insidious, and it's almost always going to be.
I guess it really depends. You should come to my birthday
to
party.
say you should do this because everyone's doing it. I mean,
you know,
I guess it really depends. You should come to my birthday party because everyone at my birthday party is coming to it. You know that. So I guess it really depends on the birthday party.
Everything's contextual. There's no one false dichotomy.
Everything's contextual.
Present only two options, implying the listener
doesn't choose option A. Present only two options, implying the listener doesn't choose option A. Option B will occur, and this will often be a catch. And this is similar to the false binary, but it's a little different. For example, you can accept Jesus into your heart, or you'll burn for all eternity.
Support the war.
It's the option A or catastrophe. Another one, you can support the war, or the enemy will, destroy us. You can accept.
Are you smart or
accept working without PPE?
If you're not stupid, then you'll do X.
Are you smart or are you stupid? If you're not stupid, then you'll do X.
And the manipulation to
this is the use of inheritance and ambiguity, and the manipulation of two options, one that's being made,
where you're
encouraging one that's being subject. It's creating the no-brainer situation,
solution has
where you're encouraging the subject to pick the desired solution as the only solution, as the alternative being,
and the best one is the best,
extremely detrimental.
Jesus in your heart, you can join our religious organization.
And the best one is the best example. Is you can accept Jesus into your heart. You can join our religious organization.
Then there's the use of repetition. And the lullaby of compliance, repeated frequently.
Then there's the use of repetition. Repetition makes
and this occurs all
the
the
lullaby of compliance, repeated frequently until it feels true. And this occurs all the time.
Either high presence or work.
It's actually one of the most. It's probably the most effective. The more you hear something, the more requires either high presence or large number of coordinated people to work. The more you hear something, the more likely it becomes emotionally resonant. Make it great America great again. You hear it so many times, it becomes emotionally resonant. Jesus loves you.
Phrases
what would Jesus do?
By control groups, whether it be
all these different phrases that are utilized by the control groups, whether it be the current MAGA movement or the evangelical movements that have been deployed by, say, the media and by CIA operators support through financials in order to manipulate the public
submit themselves
to support Israel support war in Iran.
Unjustifiable conditions.
Beyond that,
as
to submit themselves to
proving
unjustifiable conditions as the highest level of proving obedience, proving virtue,
self-sacrifice,
because the highest level of
accepting inhuman conditions.
Virtue is self-sacrifice and sort of self-denial, and so accepting
expectation
inhumane conditions
evangelical
is
interpretation. Because they were designed
sort
specifically
an
to
expectation in these
So,
Pentecostal
telling them
evangelical
shutting up
interpretations,
and just
because they were
accepting,
designed specifically to exploit.
abject poverty.
So telling them that shutting up
exploitation
and just
of any
accepting,
kind, of any
abject
kind,
poverty
is
accepting
like
exploitation
their
of
purpose,
any kind.
that
Authority
of any
is
godly,
is
and that
like
if you
their purpose.
want something to change, the only thing
Authority
you can do is
is
about it.
godly.
This was literally
And
designed
that if you
to offset
want something to change, the only thing you can do is really pray about it.
movements.
This was literally designed to
across the
offset
population. between the Port Huron Statement itself and
promoting dignity,
liberation theology, which is generally
between the Port Huron Statement itself and
what you get from the Bible is
liberation theology, which is generally
it is virtuous
the
to
Bible. What you get from the Bible
fight for human dignity.
It is virtuous
yours
to
or other people's. Not
fight
to
for
sacrifice another person's dignity for your own, or not to sacrifice another person's comfort for your own, not to
sacrifice another person's dignity for your own, or not to sacrifice another person's
It's not meant
comfort
to use
for your own, not to
obedience as a
exploit
means to
people,
enable
but to cooperate with
exploitation.
people.
But that's what
It's
it's
not
been
meant to
twisted do.
use
It's sad.
obedience as a means to enable
Jesus' example can be
exploitation.
really beautiful.
But that's what it's been
But
twisted
what
to
they do is they
It's sad.
utilize the ethics
Because
and the
Jesus' example can be
drawn
really
attractiveness
beautiful.
of that.
But what they
to
do is they utilize the ethics
subvert
and
your
the
will
drawn
in a lot of
attractiveness of
these
that
church entities
to
because they're being literally
subvert
financed
your will
by
a lot of
the
these
intelligence apparatus,
church entities because they're
domestically
being
and
literally
also
financed
provably
by
the intelligence apparatus in Israel. I mean,
domestically and
through
also
TPSA and a lot of
provably
churches.
the intelligence apparatus in
Israel.
Israel.
Finances,
Provably
looking into
to
these shell
TPSA and
companies
a
that
lot of
utilize the
churches.
Panama Papers.
I mean,
for
looking into Sheldon
not
Adelson's
just
finances,
Sheldon Adelson, but
looking into
a
these shell
lot of
companies that are
local
utilized in the
people
Panama
that
Papers
are
for
connected to
not
North
just
Island
Sheldon
that have
Adelson,
been
but a lot of
infiltrating
local
evangelical
people
churches as a
that
means
are
to
connected
access
to
children,
North Fox Island,
utilize those children
that have
to
been
create a blackmail economy,
infiltrating evangelical churches as a
essentially
means to
puppet
access children,
power players and
utilize those
politicians
children to create a
into
blackmail economy,
enriching the
and
blackmailers
essentially
themselves.
puppet
This
players
has been
and
going on for
politicians
decades. Look at North
into
Fox Island.
enriching the blackmailers themselves.
But yeah, the
this
reason
has
that
been going on for
repetition makes
decades.
right is
Look at
because
North
the
Fox
brain
Island.
uses familiarity as a
But yeah,
default
the
for
reason that
truth.
repetition
If
makes
you-
right is
if everyone's
because
saying
your
you're
brain
going to
uses
assume
familiarity as a
and so
default for
this
truth.
becomes,
That if everyone's
everyone's
saying it, you're going to
convincing
assume it's
people of
correct.
things
And
by
so
encouraging
this
enough people
becomes,
around them
a
to repeat it,
mechanism
or even
of
one
convincing
person
people of
repeating it.
things by
and then
encouraging
here's
enough
another
people
straw
around
man,
them to repeat
the
it, or even
scapegoat.
one person repeating it.
Represent your opponent's position as an
All right,
example,
and then here's
exaggerate
another one,
the
the
story
straw
where
man,
make them a
the
cutout or a
scapegoat.
caricature of evil.
Represent your opponent's
Then
position
argue
as an
against that
in an
distorted
exaggerated,
version.
distorted way, make them a cutout or a caricature of evil.
So like,
Then argue against that distorted version.
the
So
the-
like,
my opponent is a Satanist, or which is probably
the-
true at the damn time at this
my,
point.
my opponent
Or,
is a Satanist, or which is probably true at the damn time at this
we
point.
should balance
Or,
environmental protection with economic growth. And then these
we
eco-terrorists
should
want to
balance
shut down the entire
environmental
economy and
protection
go
with
back to
economic
living in
growth.
caves.
And then these eco-terrorists want to shut down the entire economy and go back to living in caves.
That's a good one, where you create this scapegoat assumption
that's a good
that
one, where
the desire to
create this scapegoat assumption that
responsibility
desire
regarding the environment is the equivalent
have
demanding
responsibility regarding the environment
the
is the
population not
equivalent
use electricity at all.
demanding
The
or
population
just not use
suggesting
electricity
that
at all.
stricter regulations on a polluting industry is the equivalent of
or
communism.
just suggesting
and,
that
like,
stricter
big
regulations on a
control
polluting industry
and,
is the equivalent
really
of communism,
shifting the entire
and
conversation
big government
away from the
control
actual issue
and
onto allegations
really
associated
shifting
with
the
the
entire conversation
It's
away from the
easier
actual
to argue
issue
against a
and onto
caricature
allegations
or an idea
associated with the
that's very
scapegoating
unpopular,
tactic.
or
It's
carrying a
easier
person,
to argue against a caricature or an idea that's very unpopular,
ignorant,
or a person,
that's much easier than actually
a position, a policy that's
and
been
that's what's
framed
become the
as
default
ignorant or evil. That's much easier than actually
this is
debating
the thing
the
that
real
really
policies, and that's what's become the default
audience continually
in
doesn't
politics.
recognize the scapegoating.
And these are the types of things that really need to be identified, because the audience
victim,
continually doesn't
even
recognize
though
the scapegoating,
debates aren't about anything
and they just
real.
see
They're just muck-rigging
like a
scapegoating
victory,
bullshit
even though
fest.
the debates aren't about anything
All right.
real. They're
Now,
just a muck-rigging,
got a couple more of these.
scapegoating
I guess I'm
bullshit
not gonna
fest.
go all of them.
All right,
So
now
I'm gonna go to
got a couple more of these. I guess I might as well go
Equivocation.
through all of them. So then we got
using the same word in two different ways, so the listener
equivocation.
accepts an argument that only works if both uses are
So,
identical. Using the same word in two different ways, so the listener
faith
accepts
means
an argument that
trust.
only works if both
Do you have faith in
uses
your
are
doctor?
identical. So faith in God
So
is
a
the
religious
same as
example
faith
maybe
in your
faith
doctor.
means trust. Do you have faith in your doctor? So faith in God is the
That's
same as
one
faith in
that
your
we
doctor. That's one that the AI came up with.
Is no longer handmade. Freedom means the ability to do what you want. My freedom
Is no longer handmade.
to swing my
freedom
fist
means
at
the ability to
your
do
nose,
what you
therefore
want.
restrictions on my behavior are
My
restrictions on
freedom to swing my fist ends at
So,
your nose.
the
Therefore,
argument there
restrictions
is
on my
that
behavior are restrictions
if
on my
you
freedom.
prevent me from committing
So,
violence on you,
the
then you're
argument
restricting
there
my
is
freedom,
that
I guess.
If you prevent me from committing violence on
Here's-
you,
here's-
then you're
here's the
restricting
one.
my freedom, I guess.
You know, we are all family and organization. It could be a corporation.
Here's
it could
a
be
good one.
religion.
You know,
And then, you know,
we
families
are all
make
family
sacrifices
and
for each
organization.
other.
It could be a corporation, it could be a religion.
So you should make
And then,
sacrifices for me.
families
for
make
us.
sacrifices for each other.
So that's the equivocation. That we're
so
a
you should
family,
make
families
sacrifices for
you
me,
make
for
sacrifices
us. So that's the
listener accepts the initial
equivocation there.
definition
We're
of the word,
family, families make
obvious,
sacrifices, you need to make
you know,
sacrifice for me.
point is made.
The listener accepts the initial definition of the word, and obvious, point is made,
equivocation,
then it shifts. The word is used differently subsequently,
and indeed desired.
but the equivocation is then weaponized.
All right, here's another one.
To get
Gaslighting.
agreement and
Make someone doubt their own
conclusion.
perception, memory, or judgment. If
All
they
right,
can't
here's
trust
another one.
themselves,
Gaslighting.
they have to trust you or authority.
Make someone doubt their own perception, memory, or
so in a
judgment.
case where
If they can't
you know,
trust themselves,
someone
they have to
blatantly did
trust you
something,
or authority.
just saying that it never happened.
So in a case where
You're remembering it wrong.
someone blatantly did
We
something,
never did that. We never promised it.
just saying
constant
that it never
denial,
happened.
even in the face of
You're
things
remembering
that
it
definitely
wrong.
happened, even if they just happened.
We never
This
did
is
that. We never promised it.
really
Just constant
commonly used. That's
denial,
one of the most
even in the
insidious.
face of things
And
that
then,
definitely
you know,
happened, even if they just
attacking
happened. This is
your sanity
really
or
commonly
something.
used. It's one of the
This
most
is about to
insidious.
be gaslight. I
And then,
suggest watching it because
attacking
it goes into how
your
these tactics
sanity
are
or
used.
something. This is about the movie Gaslight. I suggest watching it because it goes into how these tactics are used.
Or if you can make
Especially
people
against
doubt
women,
their
frankly,
perception,
women and
or if you
children.
can just refuse
If
to
you can
accept their
shake someone's
perception, you
confidence in
become
their own perception,
dependent
or if you can make other
captive to
people
your
doubt their
reality.
perception, or if you can just
Then you can
refuse to
become the
accept their
arbiter of
perception, they
truth.
become
This is one of the most
dependent
effective
or
control
captive
mechanisms.
to
It
your
does require
reality.
a certain degree
Then
of
you can
authority
become the
because you
arbiter
have
of
to
truth. This is one of the most
continually
effective
demand
control
that what they're
mechanisms. It does
saying,
require
what
a
they're
certain
experiencing
degree
is not real.
of authority
So
because you have to
isolate the
continually
subject or you
demand
have
that
to
what
have
they're saying or what they're
cooperation.
experiencing is not real.
But that
So
is-
either you have to isolate
and
the
that'll
subject
go
or you have
hand
to
in hand
have
with the authority,
cooperation.
authority type stuff.
But that is,
I'm a
and that'll go and hand in
You're
hand with the
schizophrenic and
authority,
everything
appeal
you
to
think
authority
happens.
type stuff.
I
I'm
don't think
a
you understand
psychiatrist,
schizophrenia.
so you're schizophrenic, and
Yeah,
everything
that's
that
a
you
common
think
one too,
happens
Rich.
happens.
It's like schizophrenia isn't like.
I don't think you understand
I
schizophrenia.
conveniently make up lies
Yeah, and that's a
that are
common one too,
inconvenient
which
to you,
it's like
you're
schizophrenia
not
isn't
going to
like
have a
I
schizophrenic
conveniently
like
make up lies
something
that are inconvenient to you. Like
so convincing.
you're not going to have a schizophrenic like something that is so convincingly real.
Psychotic episodes don't
and germane
feature
the
normal shit.
psychotic episodes
They
don't
feature
feature
They feature
normal
normal
shit.
shit.
It doesn't matter.
They feature
Pretending that people
demons.
are
They feature
making, yeah,
you
not,
know,
shut up. It doesn't matter. I mean,
schizophrenia,
pretending that people
they have,
are making
whatever other
shut up because they're schizophrenic
absurd.
or they have whatever
And it's
other
just meant to distract
pathologization
them,
is being deployed on them is absurd. And it's just meant to distract from the facts and to create a discreditation.
Well, he was there,
and
what he said is
to discredit the witness.
because
Then
I'm
they use
saying
the appeal to
he's this
authority.
type
He's
of
like, oh,
person.
well, he was there, but what he said is
Humans are
irrelevant
social.
because I'm saying
when we're told
he's this type
we're
of
part of a
person.
group that believes something, we tend to adopt that belief.
Humans are social. When we're told we're part of a group that believes something, we tend to adopt that belief.
If you take someone's confidence in their perception, they become dependent on
Oh, excuse me. I don't know. Sorry. Then the next one.
If you take someone's confidence in their
perception,
perception, the false consensus,
Oh, yeah, I already said that.
which
All right.
can be utilized
Then the next
in
one.
conjunction with gaslighting. Act like everyone agrees with me, like,
coordinate with young people. Gang stalking and organizational manipulation, social manipulation, they call psychosocial priming, utilize NLP in a social way. So, something happened, and then everyone in this group, the girl in, cabin 8 or 10, whatever, a great example of this, act like everyone, experiencing it different. You didn't say that, he didn't say all this stuff, when it just happened. So that would be an example of a false consensus, utilizing gaslighting. Or we all know the government is corrupt, creating this assumption that the entire group agrees that the government is corrupt. Or we all understand God's will, or we all listen to God's will, or we're all children of God's will, or something like that. And creating the assumption of, God doing this. Creating the assumption of knowledge of God's will, creating a unified consensus for what that will is. The assumption that if, I tell you what God's will is, everyone's agreed with me that that's God's will. I tell you what God's will is, everyone's agreed with me that that's God's will. So this is what I was trying to say. Human beings are social animals. When we're told that a group believes something, there's credibility that's associated with the group. And again, you're going to assume that people are being honest with you. And that's why it's a lot about identifying people that are doing shit like this. Because most people are not going to be manipulating like this. But at the same time, people that are in positions of authority are trying to create positions of authority or trying to create persuasion. They will disproportionately utilize this. And when you find someone utilizing these types of techniques in an exploitive way, don't trust them anymore. Be conscious of it. Tell other people. Here's another one: the sunk cost trap, or the pot committed. Convince someone they've already invested too much, and then quitting would be a waste of the investment. Committing them that they're almost there, something like that. Keeping them engaging by reminding them of prior commitments. You spent 3 years with us. You've made friends here. You've built a life. Why would you want to throw that away? We've been together for years. We have a house. We have a history. You can't just leave. Together we've gotten so close to God. What you're trying to do here is to reject God. You need to come back to the fold. Humans don't like waste. No one likes waste. No one likes inefficiency. And this is a way that you can get people to commit to mistakes that they've made in the past, doubling down on exploitation and continuing it despite having finally come to the point where they recognize it. If you can convince someone that they've already invested too much to quit, or that they can't get out, they'll keep investing to avoid admitting the first investment was wasted, or in hopes of regaining the initial investment, or under the assumption that they have to keep committing because there's nothing to salvage if that initial commitment doesn't pan out. And this is the sunk cost fallacy, or the pot committed. And then again, here's another one: the slow boil, utilizing incremental changes, or insisting on incremental changes. The idea of taking it one piece at a time, change things gradually so the target doesn't notice. If you change everything at once, they're more likely to be apprehensive and hostile. But if you can change just one little piece at a time, this is another one that's best utilized using psychosocial priming multiple people. This is done in laws all the time, the way that they, think about the Patriot Act and the FISA courts. Now they keep expanding those and expanding those. We're introducing this new law, then we're expanding this law, and then this law needs to be completely transformed, or this law has completely transformed how things work. That's the case of the FISA courts, in all these different mechanisms that have been enabled to allow mass surveillance. They initially introduced these anti-terrorism things, but then they've used those to surveil everyone, regardless, incrementally, using another terrorist function, or just the minutiae of the legislation to keep increasing the amount of surveillance and the justifications for the surveillance. The brain notices changes not states. If things change slowly, you chat to each small change and don't notice the direction of the overall movement. So this becomes a means to exploit you without your consciousness again. The thing about these tricks and these tactics is once you know them, you'll start seeing them everywhere in politics, in religion, in marketing, in your relationships, in your self-talk, in friends, in peers, and that's the point. The people running these systems count on the fact that people don't know how they work and that they're ignorant to them. Once you're conscious of it, these tactics are not as effective. The moment you consciously recognize the presupposition, it loses power. Awareness is the antidote. So, be conscious of how you're being exploited using language and tell other people how to be more conscious of it. It's the first step in unwinding this tragedy that we're marching towards as a country and as a planet.